Part 2. It pretty much picks up right where Part 1 left off. Scarlett is heading to Atlanta. Now, Atlanta is a really special place for her because, as her father told her, the name Atlanta was given to the city on the very same day that she was born. And on top of that, there was a lot more opportunities. But there's a bit of bitter hatred that she has to live with the very person who stole the love of her life. At least, there are other things to do in Atlanta. On the train ride there, she really sees how big and bustling of a city it became. With the railroad system, there is a lot of commerce. There's a lot of things being built. But the biggest sight to behold in the entire city are the hospitals. There must be about 10 different hospitals where trainloads of mutilated Confederate soldiers are coming in the hopes that they will either be able to continue fighting again or just be able to continue on living. While on the train, Scarlett is assaulted by several different women saying, "Hey, you need to join my hospital committee." No, she's supposed to be part of my hospital committee, and so on. She finally makes it to what actually would have been her house if Charles was still alive. And there she meets Melanie, their aunt, which everybody affectionately nicknames Pity Pat, as well as Slave, that is so close to the family that everybody just goes around calling him Uncle Peter. There, Scarlett also meets with the doctor. And that is where she gets the answer as to what in the world a hospital committee is in the first place. With just seeing how excited everybody is to have a new face in town, she figured, alright, maybe there's some sort of party going on, but the doctor very much assures her, you're going to be a nurse, it is going to stink, you got to take care of so many different wounds, say goodbye to several dashing heroes, as well as just all the other ins and outs of trying to keep the cause going. Now, Scarlett just kind of does this because she has to, and it's really the only chance she has to get out of the house. But Melanie, on the other hand, is all too glad to do it. She's very vigorous. The smell of gangrene all around her doesn't get to her. She's not squeamish about the sight of all the gore that is just going on everywhere. She is just happy to do her part to make it so that the South will live forever. Scarlett, on the other hand, is very disillusioned in about 1-2 months' time of the whole affair. And on top of that, she is just hanging out with only women because all the men are obviously in the hospital beds, except for the doctor as well as the state militia, but they're not really people you can call upon. And plus, being stuck in the whole mourning phase that we discussed in Part 1, she's not really allowed to even go partying, even if there were people available. But really the other big thing is, she just doesn't really get along well with other women. She is a little more on the masculine side and much prefers the company of men. While there is a bit more action going on in Atlanta with her being able to meet so many dashing heroes, as well as to be able to have a purpose, to be able to be at the hospital, to create new bandages, as well as so many other things. But generally, she's just bored out of her mind. That is until one fateful day. So the hospital is trying to secure funds to be able to keep everybody going, to be able to pay for supplies, to be able to get more people to keep on fighting the good fight. Now, ordinarily, somebody that is in mourning is not allowed to be at such a party that is being used to raise these funds. But one of the hospital committees had to back out, and there's no choice but to have Scarlett jump in and be able to help keep the stand going, as well as try to raise a little more funds. Now here is where we get an interesting tidbit in history. Not one I feel like a lot of people talk about. Over in England, they were actually pretty welcoming of the Civil War, it seems, because they wanted cotton. And on top of that, there was still obviously some bitter feelings about not only the Revolutionary War, but the War of 1812. So not only were they happy to see the country burn, but also happy to see that they could get a steady supply of cotton, which was not really something that was found at the time. Or at least that's how the book interprets it. So in getting the cotton out, England was able to pay anything. More often than not, it is the job of a smuggler to be able to take all the cotton possible, go over there to England, and then convert it to medical supplies or other such essentials that you need to be able to fight a war. There are two very famous smugglers, Captain Picard, I still can't get over that name, and Captain Butler. Both of them are invaluable resources to the Confederate cause, but yet nobody really knows what they look like. We do get a glimpse of one of them at this party to be able to raise funds. And this Captain Butler is the same Rhett Butler from Part 1. And just like Part 1, Rhett is just such a breath of fresh air from all this decorum, all these rules, all these regulations. He's just somebody that's looked at the entire system and just went, nope. So his presence is very much appreciated with all these people that are stuck with all these rules that they have to follow to a T. Otherwise, the old people in town will talk and then the reputation will be ruined. Rhett is able to spot Scarlet. They start to catch up on old times. Obviously, Scarlet is not very happy to see Rhett because the last time she saw him was the one time she was not a lady. She got violent, she started throwing stuff, and on top of that, he's the only person that knows that she's been in love with Ashley the whole time and that Charles was just a way to try to get even with this whole thing. So generally, the party's going alright. They're raising money by selling various things. When the doctor gets up on the main podium, and he puts out a suggestion that he worries that the moral committee, as most people put it, is going to try to put him down for this. So, there is plans to be able to start a dance, but what the doctor proposes is that you have to pay for a partner to be able to dance with. At first, there is a little bit of a hubbub saying this is kind of out of regulations, this isn't gentlemanly, womanly, ladylike, or what have you. But when the doctor keeps assuring everybody that the money is to go to the war effort, something that is so absolutely holy that nobody questions it, they just go along with it. That is when Rhett does something truly amazing. He basically just takes a bar of pure gold, puts it on the counter and says, I want to dance with Scarlet. To which everybody is just like, but she's a widow. You can't dance with a widow. You're going to defame her. You're going to do a whole bunch of things to her. And he's like, I don't want to dance with anybody else. You see this? This only works for Scarlet. And Scarlet basically just having enough of trying to play the part of the widow that has supposedly had her heart in the ground since Charles died, just throws off her shawl and just says, screw it, I'm gonna have some fun this evening. And so, she goes for the dance. And the thing I love most about Rhett's character, it very much reminds me of some of the morals that I found in Atlas Shrugged. Now, for those of you that haven't watched my other book reviews, that is my favorite book of all time, and, well, it's just as thick as this one. So, Rhett has had this reputation, being the black sheep in a rather upstanding family. He has done a lot of bad things, and he is not what the locals call received, which basically means he can't just go into anybody's house and just expect people to welcome him with open arms. What Rhett tells Scarlet is that he chose to throw away his reputation. What was the point in being a gentleman? It didn't give him any happiness, and he just had all these different rules that he had to follow. He just wanted to be his own person. And that is why Rhett has a thing for Scarlet. When he saw her finally put off the pretense of being a lady in high society, he found that very attractive. It was different. He could have any lady he wanted to, but he didn't want a cookie cutter. He wanted somebody that would stand up for herself. And so, obviously, this dance makes Scarlet seem all the more attractive to Rhett. And all the time, Scarlet is like, "You really put me on the spot. Why did you do this to me?" To which he just looks at her and says, "I can tell from your face. You never cared about Charles, and you just wanted to dance." And she keeps trying to deny it, but Rhett's just like, "Come on, it's me. I'm the only person that knows your secret. Just give up and enjoy yourself." To which she kind of does. However, she only goes that far. Rhett even suggests, "You know what? Take off the black that you've been wearing for your mourning. It's not like you actually cared for Charles, and wouldn't you much rather be wearing something more colorful anyway?" But, once again, she is still very much afraid of the system that she lives in. Which, as I was reading this personally, I couldn't understand why, because she already broke the system, and she's not being arrested, she's not being killed, she's not all of a sudden being seen as like the most despicable creature on the planet. She's just having a good time. And nobody cares because, well, it's all just seen as something for the glory of the state. This is something that is kind of upsetting to Scarlet, is she, in a ways, wanted to rebel against the system, but nobody really saw it as rebellion. They just saw it as her doing her part to the cause. Even when she gave her wedding ring to be able to have Meltdown and be made into more precious things for the troops, she was doing that to finally say goodbye to old Charles, not to help honor his legacy like everybody thought of. In fact, here's a fun thing. You could create a fun drinking game with this part 2. Every time the author says, "How could nobody realize how much she was suffering?" or "How is it that nobody could read what was going on?" But Rhett was the only person that could. Now, this is something that's vaguely touched upon in the movie, but, well, first off, Scarlet didn't have a kid in the movie. And when she does go to the hospital, she is just completely and utterly sickened by it. And she does not do her part for any of it. In fact, it seemed only shortly after was she able to catch up with Rhett, and, well, I feel like saying more than that would probably spoil what's in part 3. But this whole party scene, as far as I can remember, that was not in the movie, which I find very unfortunate. But to get back to the book, though, Scarlet still keeps up her job at the hospital, but, well, now that she's kind of a disgrace given her actions at the party, she's perfectly fine with going to the hospital. She's actually hitting on some of the soldiers, and you know what? They really don't mind. Outside, they're probably doped up on morphine, and they're probably going to die tomorrow anyway, so both are just fine with trying to hit on each other and spark a little bit of romance here and there. During this time, though, she picks up a nasty habit. So, when everybody is out to the hospital, she basically says, "Oh, the day is too much. I'm going to faint. I can't go there." When she has the house to herself, she goes into Melanie's room and reads all of Ashley's letters. She wants to find proof that Ashley does indeed still carry a torch for her. There is not really a whole lot of solid proof here, outside of the idea that Ashley is more formal. These letters are not to a lover, these are to a sister, or to a really close friend. And there is one particular note that really gets to Scarlet. Ashley basically admits the South has already lost, and having to go to war, you basically destroyed what was left civilian life. There can be no going back, even if they did win the war. There could never be going back to the way things had been. And while Ashley is still loyal to the cause, he is having second thoughts about being involved in this thing in the first place. Scarlet tips that in the back of her memory. Now, Also during this time, Rhett is trying his best to woo Scarlet, and it's something that kind of works. Rhett seems to be the only person that can understand Scarlet. Scarlet can't understand why nobody can read what's clearly written on her face, but Rhett can. And along the way, Rhett is trying to convert Scarlet to the dark side, to just give up the pretenses of being a lady and just live your life. And even more interesting is that Rhett is just a big fan of seeing Scarlet being angry. Because not only is that her being at her least ladylike, but he enjoys the spunk. He enjoys the good fight that Scarlet has when that old Irish blood is starting to boil to the surface. Along the way, Rhett even smuggles in some gifts for Scarlet, some of which are very precious commodities now that there is a giant blockade surrounding Georgia as well as most of the coastal towns. And one of the big things is a green dress. It was brought all the way in from France. And one of the interesting things the book notes is that Rhett is a very fashion-forward person. Like, he likes to go to France, he likes to catch up on what is popular women's fashion. And if it was anybody that didn't look as manly or as dashing as him, well, they probably would have thought he was gay or something. But because Rhett is who he is, some of the women just go up to him and ask for fashion advice. And nobody really feels off-put by this, and Rhett isn't really seen as any lesser of a man for doing this. What does ruin his reputation is that he kind of gives up the pretense of pretending to do this all for the cause of the Deep South. He's really just doing this for the money, and he is not afraid to tell people that. In fact, he almost gets a little joy out of shaking up people's truths. All of a sudden, these people are like, what? You mean these smugglers are not devout and holy people that think of nothing but the cause itself? You mean to say that people are just doing this for money? In the which Rhett is just like, what world have you people been living in? But the only house he could still go to is that of Scarlet and Melanie. And while Rhett has the hots for Scarlet, he does also put on quite the charm for Melanie at the same time, which that's really the only reason he's still welcome there, even when the whole neighborhood just wants him to drop dead. And I think I went off on a tangent, so one of the many presents that Rhett gives Scarlet is a green dress. And there was quite a lot of back and forth with arguing about this because she feels like removing her black morning wear would be the last straw. Everybody would basically put her and Rhett together. Two reprobates that just aren't allowed to be anywhere because they'll poison the minds of the youth. But after a lot of giving in, she does end up wearing the dress. And once again, just like her dance at the party, nobody cares. Now in this part, we really go into the details of the war. There are some major battles that the South had won during this time. But as time goes on, it seems like Rhett's words at the party are starting to ring true. Things are getting insanely expensive. Since the South can't make any goods, they have to buy them. And the only place they can buy them is from England. And with the blockade getting tighter and tighter around Georgia, essentials like food and clothes are just becoming rarer and rarer by the day. And on top of that, the townsfolk don't really take kindly to these smugglers anyway, because Rhett kind of showed that, yeah, most of these smugglers are just profiteers that are in it for the money. Eventually, they have to relent. It's either pay triple or starve. So, obviously, they pay triple. And the value of the Confederate dollar just keeps going down and down and down, despite the efforts of the president, Jefferson Davis, as well as his cabinet, which even there is a bit of back and forth going on as well. The people are starting to wonder if Jefferson Davis really does have the people's best interest in mind. However, things get a little brighter during Gettysburg. This is the first time that the South has managed to at least get to the North. And fun fact, that's actually where I got this hat, was Gettysburg. And I can tell you, it is a massive battlefield. There was a lot of people there, and there was also a lot of death there. Now, if you know history class, you'll know that this is kind of where the turning point of the war was. This is when the Union, the North if you prefer, was starting to win. This was a major upset for the Confederates, but they still very much try to keep in high spirits. In fact, Scarlett is even raised in the higher spirits when that Ashley, as well as a platoon of his men, are on furlough, and so they spend a week in Atlanta. All the time she is trying to figure out how she is going to get him alone, so that way she can figure out once and for all if there is actually love there. There are lingering clues, but she wants hard proof. However, such things are just not possible, as Melanie just never leaves him alone. And on top of that, they're a married couple, so they even sleep in the same bed. There's no way Scarlett could just go into the bedroom and be like, hey, I love you. It's not only will Melanie be right there, but, well, that'll definitely destroy your reputation. At the end of that week, she is able to get to Ashley alone. And there, just like before, he professes her love for him. However, this time, he seems a lot more receptive of it. In fact, before they leave, they share a very deeply connected kiss for a very long time. A very passionate one. And right as Ashley goes out the door, they both stare at each other in only a way that lovers trapped by circumstance would do. However, it's something that didn't last. There was a scouting party where Ashley and 3 other men have gone missing and have been declared dead. Obviously, this news is quite a shock for everybody in that household. Melanie, Scarlett, and Aunt Pitty Pat. But at the same time, there is a vague glimmer of hope that, well, perhaps he's just missing. Perhaps he is alive. And so, Melanie basically just lives at the telegrams company. However, this is such a thing that she can't do anymore because during those times behind closed doors, Ashley made passionate love to Melanie and, well, she is pregnant. This was just as devastating of news to Scarlett as it was discovering that Ashley was missing and presumed dead. And on top of that, Scarlett even wonders if Melanie can even handle it. She has such a tiny figure that a baby could either kill her or just fracture what tiny little frame she has. She passes out at the telegraph's office, where, wouldn't you know, Rhett Butler comes in once again and returns Melanie back to a safe place. Once again, kind of ignoring the decorum, basically asking, aren't you pregnant? Shouldn't you be a little more safe about all this? However, Melanie is in such a state of delirium that this decorum is just swept under the rug anyway. Now, it's something that has been very well established in this part that Rhett doesn't really have a country. He doesn't really care. As he puts it, there is money to be made in building an empire, but there is even more money to be made in destroying it. And so, he's got contacts on both sides, depending on what way the war turns. Either way, he's gonna make out like a bandit. And so, he uses his contacts to try to figure out where in the world Ashley is. And, much to everybody's delight, Ashley is alive. However, he was wounded and he was sent to one of the most brutal camps in Illinois, known as Stone Island. Ashley, as well as all the other Confederate POWs there, are given a chance to live. Basically, they have to swear allegiance to the Union, serve to be able to fend off all the Native Americans in the Midwest for 2 years, and then they will be free of charge, and on top of that, they'll actually feed them something. So, the POWs in the South are not treated very well. Not so much because of malice, but because there's so little food and materials to go around that the Confederates can barely feed themselves, let alone feed POWs. So the treatment of the Union POWs is bad, and in retaliation, the treatment of the Confederate POWs is also bad. So Scarlet, using the brain that Rhett is very much in love with, basically says, well, why didn't Ashley just swear allegiance and then just desert sometime halfway through? To which Melanie is like, bite your tongue. Ashley is dead hard set on this cause and would never willingly swear allegiance to that pure, black-hearted enemy of the Union. As Rhett is about to leave, Scarlet asks, would you have sworn the oath and then escaped later? To which Rhett's just like, well, yeah, of course. And this ties into another thing I missed. So, in Ashley's letter, it talked about how he wasn't really feeling all that dedicated to the war at this point. Well, Rhett was never dedicated to the war, but yet somehow when it came out of Rhett's mouth, it made sense, but when it came out of Ashley's mouth, it was something that Scarlet just couldn't comprehend. And so that is part 2 of Gone with the Wind.